And also, please say hello in the chat. I would love to know where everyone is tuning in from across Turtle Island. The collective operates from coast to coast, so we're so happy to see everyone here, regardless of where you're from. And we will also have some door prizes. So I'm randomly selecting folks that are here today, and they will receive a copy of Freedmen of the Frontier. And so there are actually 2 volumes of this, Miss Angela's work, who you'll hear from next right after me. And so let me know that you're here, and we'll announce who the winners of the door prizes are after the formal program before we do our Q&A. So with that, I'll hand it over to Miss Angela to do introductions, and then we'll dive into the overview of the Oklahoma Freedmen Collective. Miss Angela?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you can all hear me. It is such a pleasure to be here and to see that we have a wonderful group coming in from everywhere, Tucson, North Carolina, all over the country. So I want to welcome you to this Oklahoma Freedmen Collective. But I want to introduce you to some of the founding members of the collective, some of whom are right here on the panel. Some I think are coming in a little while from other parts of the country. First, I'm going to introduce Keziah Anderson. She is a Choctaw and Chickasaw Freedmen descendant. Her Dawes Rose ancestors were Selena or Selina. I'm not quite sure how they pronounce it in the household. Selina Mae Pollen and her husband, Frank. Well, Keziah herself is a graduate of Columbia University and just graduated, in fact, cum laude, with departmental honors in her discipline of history, which we all like that. She recently completed a thesis on post-allotment freedmen history entitled "On the 40 Acres That the Government Give Me, Independent Freed People of the 5 Slaveholding Tribes as Landholders, Indigenous Land Allotment Policy, and the Disruption of Racial, Gender, and Class Hierarchies in Jim Crow, Oklahoma." We are so excited to see that the next generation is choosing to explore this rich history that we all share. Her sister, Terza Anderson, is, of course, a Choctaw and Chickasaw Freedmen descendant. Her Dawes Rosen ancestors are the very same people that I mentioned, Selena and Frank Pollen and Winnie Butler. She is a senior at Barnard College, which is a part of Columbia University. She is studying history and religious studies. She's researched freedmen throughout her undergraduate experience, and she will be writing her thesis on the history of freedmen in Indian Territory and Oklahoma. So once again, we are totally embracing new scholars, young scholars who are looking into this history. Coming to us from Kansas City is Mr. Kenneth Ford, who has a remarkable background. He comes from the Sales family, Harry and Jane Sales. Their youngest daughter was Grace Sales Ford, who was his own grandmother. He is now, of course, a retired person. He's a retired iron worker. He worked for 32 years in that field, and he served 2 terms as Jackson County Water District #1 director. He's also a writer. He has authored a book called Romance Your Finance. He worked as a professional musician. I want to hear about that. He's an entrepreneur, and he is also, of course, devoted to his interest in freedmen history. He's the founder and the director of the Descendant Freedmen Alliance of Kansas City. Denise Friday is a native of Kansas City, Kansas. Her interest in freedmen history stems from the history of her grandparents, who were Creek freedmen. They were Benny Friday and Josephine Anderson Friday. Her grandfather, Benny, was the first in that line of Fridays who was born free. He was the son of David Friday, who was once enslaved by Samuel Chicote, the well-known Creek who was twice principal chief, and he was also a well-known Methodist minister. Now, her grandmother, Josephine Anderson, comes from the community of people that belong to the old North Fork colored tribal town and the Creek Nation. Now, Denise has been doing her research for over 22 years, but she does other things as well in her free time. She enjoys scrapbooking, of course, researching family history, which we all enjoy, and of course, she enjoys working with young people as well. Coming to us from North Texas is Robin Huey. She is a registered nurse, a mother, small business owner, and she's an active American history researcher. Now, her family stems from Choctaw and Chickasaw Freedmen. She's president of the City of DeSoto, Texas Historical Foundation. She's a member of the African American group of the Dallas Genealogical Society. She's also a blogger, and she blogs on her site, The Super Genealogist, about her family's connections to the 5 slaveholding tribes. Her direct family descends from Isabella Blue Harlan, who was a Choctaw freedwoman, and Elijah Harlan, a Chickasaw freedman, both of whom are of mixed African and Native American ancestry. I'll also add that Robin is deeply into her DNA connections that she is finding all the time through her research. Another member of our team is Terry Ligon of Northern California. He's a devoted researcher and a blogger from the greater Oakland area. He is a direct descendant of Betty Ligon. Many of you have heard that name, who was the head litigant in the well-known case known as Equity Case 7071. And that was the case that represented over 2,000 Chickasaw freed people who were seeking transfer of their status from being on the freedman roll to the blood roll. In addition to that, Terry is the owner of 3 blogs, the Black and Red Journal, the Indian Territory Reader, and Betty's List, focusing on the many cases that stem out of Equity 7071. Beyond that, Terry created a YouTube channel, Video Griot, where many stories from Indian Territory can be found. And for the past 2 years, he's been a member of the faculty of MAGI, M-A-A-G-I, the Midwest African American Genealogy Institute. Among our community here of founders, we also have Ian McCants, who is a Chickasaw freedman and anthropology student from Oklahoma City. His studies have focused on the culture and the lived experiences of Chickasaw freedmen from Mississippi to Indian Territory, and which is now, of course, the state of Oklahoma. His hobbies are beading as well as gardening. He is a direct descendant of Louisa Yates and George Yates, who were both founders of the town of Tatum's, an all-Black town in Oklahoma, formed by freedmen living in the Wild Horse area. And of course, there were other African Americans who joined the Tatum community who had immigrated to the territory. Another direct ancestor of his is Caledonia Newberry, who was a claimant on the Equity Case 7071. Nika Sewell Smith, familiar to many genealogists around the country, is a native of California, but she has strong ties, well, to Oklahoma, Louisiana, and other parts of the country. She's a professional genealogist, a photographer, a documentarian, and a writer. She's founder and creator of Black ProGen, a genealogy community of professional genealogists of African and Latino descent. She's a faculty member of MAGI, the Midwest African American Genealogy Institute, and she is also a card-carrying citizen of the Cherokee Nation. Nika is devoted to telling many stories of her favorite ancestor, Ike Rogers. And if you haven't heard her tell the story, you need to hear that story. He was also known as one of the well-known the Black U.S. deputy marshals who wrote for Judge Parker. And he was also an advocate for freedmen and the status of freedmen in the Cherokee Nation. Nika's research has taken her into communities from Louisiana to New England, as well as far-reaching places like Australia. Her research is all over the place. And thanks to Nika, she has made and brought many of us into a new arena because she's made inroads that are now being made successfully into this online environment. Shelby Ward is an attorney by profession who lives in Eastern Tennessee. She is also the host of this launch today. She's a direct descendant of Wallace Willis, who's said to have been the composer of many songs of which you know, including Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. He lived in the Hugo area of the Choctaw Nation. And of course, he's also known as the composer of additional songs that are known as well-revered spirituals. I will say that also Shelby has been able to dismantle some misinformation about her ancestor, Wallace Willis. Often he and Minerva are said or treated as husband and wife, and she, through her research, has proven that they are actually father and daughter, which is quite interesting. Last year, she attended Maggie, the Genealogy Institute that I mentioned earlier, and she participated in the Oklahoma Freedmen genealogy track. This was the first time that Freedmen became an area of focus at any major genealogy event. She's also an avid scrapbooker as well as a reader, and she has emerged as a leader or the leader in establishing this Oklahoma Freedmen Collective. And myself, yours truly, I'm Angela Walton-Raji. I'm a native of Western Arkansas and Eastern Oklahoma, my hometown being Fort Smith, Arkansas. Of course, you know our most famous citizen, Judge Parker, the hanging judge. But beyond that, I do research the communities, both in Western Arkansas and Eastern Oklahoma. I'm the author of 3 books, the most recent being Volume 2 of Freedmen of the Frontier, Selected Creek and Seminole Freedmen Families. I'm the owner of several blogs which focus on Indian Territory, the African Native American Genealogy blog, and Choctaw Freedmen Legacy. I'm a founding member of Maggie, and I host a blog devoted to history also for U.S. colored troops. 4 years ago, I co-created a website called Mapping the Freedmen's Bureau with a colleague from South Carolina. I'm owner of the African Roots podcast and African Roots TV on YouTube. I moderate the Facebook group Choctaw Chickasaw Freedmen Descendants that now has over 600 members. But that's who we are. We're excited that you're here, and we're anxious for you to start to tell your stories so all of us can collectively put our histories back on the historical landscape from which they come. Shelby, I'm turning it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Angela. That was an incredible and beautiful introduction of all of us. And one thing that I loved about it in particular was connecting our ancestors, because they are here with us even today. And so with these stories and with this space, and I'm learning that the continuity between the past and the present and the present and the past. And so with that, let me get back to the Prezi that I had earlier, because with that, you'll get to see an overview of the collective, our mission, what we're doing, our next steps coming up for the year, and you'll also hear from more of the folks that Ms. Angela introduced. So again, I'm Shelby Ward, and let me screen share. Get back to the look here. I'll go into, let me see my presentation mode. Okay. So first we wanted to share the mission. So Ken, did you want to go ahead and share that with us?
Sure, thank you. Again, you've been welcomed, but I just want to welcome all of you. I'm very excited and encouraged by the mission of what we're doing here with the Oklahoma Freedmen Collective. Not only I'm excited mostly because of we represent the 5 tribes. That's important, I believe. Also, we come from a cross section of the country. Everybody that's on the panel represents us different parts of the country. So that's exciting to me. Then also, we are generational. We have seasoned veterans at the Freedmen, in the Freedmen cause that are on board. We also have some professional young people who are on top of the technology. And all these 3 elements, I think, are important to driving our mission. And the mission is Number one, we want to educate descendants of the Five Tribes Freedmen about methods of learning their remarkable history. Secondly, we want to empower descendants to use technology to tell your stories. And thirdly, we want to create avenues of communication among freedmen groups, communities, and organizations. So that is our mission, and I'll turn it back over to Shelby.
Great. Let me see here. Going to our next slide. And with that, in order to work towards that mission, we have a framework. And some of you got a chance to take a look at that framework because our website is unlocked. And if you haven't looked at all the pages of our website, please go back and do that. And one of the things you will see on the homepage is what we call the Storyteller Metro Roadmap. And so with that map, it has different stops and different ways to progress towards learning your family stories and then also telling your family stories. So the first part of that is learning, because there's this incredible rich history that is actually hidden in plain sight. And so some of us were aware of that through some oral history, but there's still a lot to learn. And so with the collective, we want to actually learn that history and understand key terms. So the glossary of freedmen, genealogy, and then also thinking about how to really get the most out of our oral history, study the cluster genealogy that's present in our communities. As Miss Angela said, we have deep histories in certain places and family groups, and then also to incorporate the best practices of genealogy. And we have different checklists that we're building to really equip people to be able to analyze historical documents. But then the second part of that is to share, because this information can be known by individuals, but we want to share it with our families and the broader community. And so with that, we have different processes that we have planned. So learning what storyteller style works best for people through a quiz, and then building teams so we can work together, and then having seminars so we can learn from each other and hear from collective members that do scrapbooking and other things. And then have a family day where we actually showcase these stories every year. So that, Nika, you can talk about some of the upcoming events that we have regarding that framework.
Absolutely. So thank you all again for taking time out of your Saturday afternoon or morning, depending on where you are sitting, to join us. And really our ancestors, our freedmen ancestors are here with us right now. And I just have to honor them being here, and the fact that I see all of these people in the room behind us, standing behind us, cheering us on right now. I don't know if the rest of the panel feels that way, but I do. I feel like it literally is all the districts of the old Indian Territory are standing behind us going, yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for getting our story out there, for not leaving it in some database. So with that energy, that is what we are coming to you all with. And one of the ways that we're going to continue to allow our ancestors to drive this story and to really fuel our energy and to fuel just getting this information out there are through monthly events. Our plan is to have a hangout on the first Saturday of the month, starting on August 1st. And these particular events are going to be structured to help you get through the process of figuring out what kind of storyteller that you are, right? Because I think one of the hardest things that people encounter, whether they are freedmen of the 5 civilized tribes or whether they are just a genealogist, is how do I get the story out? What are the tools and the things that I need? What works best for me? What doesn't work for me? What should I explore? What should I not explore, right? And so we want to not only empower genealogists, but we want to empower freedmen to tell their stories and not rely on other people to do it for us, because we have all the tools, the tips, the tricks, the know-how to do it ourselves. So our way of keeping ourselves and our story before you is to meet at the beginning of the month. As I mentioned, we're going to start on August the 1st with our first meetup. And so your action to take with that, hold on, I lost my window. Let me go back. Got to see where you guys are. Your action to take, and we have put the link inside of the chat. Download the Metro map. And I love this. I just have to give all the praise and the glory to Shelby, because don't even think that I even touched that. I helped with the concept, but Miss Shelby Ward was the design queen So I no longer hold that title. Matter of fact, Shelby is all the purple love. This is all her. I'm sorry. Let me toggle view, because Shelby, stop screen sharing, because you didn't. We're gonna do this. We literally have to give our applause and our gratitude to Shelby Ward, who has really been the driving force behind this since we were at Maggie last year. And literally has taken this to a place that I don't think all of us were even ready for until that site just went out. And I was like, I can't even believe we did this in a year. There are organizations that are around right now that are claiming to help people to tell stories, and they don't give you a roadmap. We literally gave you Muni and Bart in a map for genealogy. So Shelby, please take your bow and please accept the love that we are giving you, because I know how modest you are, but I'm not going to let this day go by and not give you the love that you deserve to get on this.
Oh, thank you, Nika. Thank you.
So we can go back to screen share. We can get back to the action, but I just had to make sure that we did that. All right. So your to do today. Yes, I know people calling me deaconess. Whatever. Your job today is to download the Metro map, whether you are a freedman or not, because I really think it will help everyone in the genealogical community to understand how we can just really make our stories come alive and pop, and how we can take methodical steps to get those stories out there, whether they are small in scale or whether it's a larger scale project, and to give yourself the ability to dream about what these things could become, and not to be encumbered based on finances or skill sets. You see this group of middle-aged, young, and old Black folks put this together. So that means that you can too. Did you hear me? I'm gonna repeat it again. This multi-generational group of Black people put this together because we knew we had a story and we had something to offer that was not being shared. And so, in addition to the Metro map, we also have a survey that we have that is for descendants of the freedmen of the 5 civilized tribes, along with our supporters, people who work in spaces like the Historical Society in Oklahoma, or maybe it may be the genealogy group that is in a different location that maybe has a lot of folks that are freedmen of the 5 civilized tribes. Whatever it is, we want to hear from you and we want your input, because we put our best foot forward in terms of what we thought the needs were in our community, but we need you to meet us back so that we can continue to meet the need and meet you where you are. All right. And naturally, we've got an email and we've got a website. In fact, I wonder if you have managed to just go ahead and frolic in the, I don't know, in the grove that is our website. There's a lot of content on there. In fact, I wish that if I was as young as Ian or Tirza or Keziah, that I had a glossary of terms to understand what the freedmen were and certain things were referred to. But now, because that wish has moved into a, here you go. Now that we've learned, we're imparting the information onto you. So be sure, if you have anything you want to talk to us about, please feel free to email us at hello@okfreedmen.org. Our website is okfreedmen.org. We're also on Instagram and we're also on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, right? And so we plan on sharing a lot, because just within our little group of people, we got some stories. Everything from folks getting shot and kidnappings to equity cases, people using their muscle in the legal sense. Think about this. We've got people who are part of equity case 7071, and now instead of having to have a lawyer fight for us, the lawyer is leading us. That's huge, y'all. Think about it. Instead of it being, Angela can talk about Judge Parker, Angela can talk about how my ancestor drove the people to George Parker to get them hung on the gallows, right? We are shifting the very nature of this story. And I'm telling you all, the ancestors are behind us cheering. They are excited. They are just blessed by this, just like how I am. So I'm gonna shut up. Shelby, I'm gonna pass the torch back to you.
Well, thank you, Nika, for wrapping us up. And we're so excited to have everyone here. And so please reach out to us, like Nika shared. through our website or through our social media pages. And with the surveys, shortly I'll put links to them directly in the chat so you can have them, but they're also available on the website. So on the homepage, you can see a strip for the Freedmen survey, and that one will close, I think, November 1st because it's annual. So we'll take all that data in and use it for this year, and we'll do the same thing next year. But the supporter survey is on the contact page, and it will always be there. So if you have an idea that comes to you later in the year, you can go back and fill out that survey. So with that, I think we can start looking at the questions. And maybe we can take a few questions before I announce the door prize winners, because I wanted to confirm that the winners, are still with us. Yeah, so Nika, I guess I can let you or whoever else should be kind of fielding the questions or where you think the questions need to be.
Yeah, there are a couple hands that are raised. There is Mark Harper has a question, and so does, I think, W. Looney. I'm going to assume that's Wanda Looney that has her hand raised. They've had their hand raised since the beginning, so I'm not sure. Go ahead and feel free to type your question in the chat box if you can find that. If you can't, let us know. Well, of course, how would you let us know? Because you don't know how to type into the chat. You don't know where to find it. Should be at the bottom of your screen, right towards the middle. You should have the option to click the chat button so we can see what you want to say. Randy Taylor has a hand raised. You want me to allow people to talk, Shelby?
Sure.
Okay.
Because
all right.
we
Well,
do
Mark
have
had his hand
time
up first, so I'll press him. Mark, we're going to give you the ability to talk. All right, Mark, you can unmute yourself. Ask your question.
And the unmute button is at the bottom left-hand corner if you're having trouble finding it.
Thank you, Ian McCants. Coming in like the voice of God.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can. What's up, Mark?
Okay. Hello. I just wanted to know if the Freedmen Council, if we will ever assemble a unified council to address all the tribal councils for us to be represented as a government entity. What I mean is, will there ever be a tribal council of freedmen? That's my question.
Is your question based on historically, was there ever a council of freedmen, or are you asking a question looking towards the future? Can you clarify that?
My question is looking towards the future. Well, because I'm a Cherokee member, I'm a tribal member, a card-carrying member, and I just wanted to know, will there ever be representation from this Freedmen descendant council in the Cherokee Nation or the Creek Nation? That's my question.
Well, you don't mind,
Shelby?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I guess I can say this. So as a part of our mission, that third part, working in collaboration with other freedmen groups. So I know that some freedmen groups are paying close attention to some of the political related matters that are going on within our 5 tribes. And on our end, we're more focused on genealogy, history, and storytelling. But I would definitely say that we support the work that our other freedmen groups do, and we're also members of those groups. But for the purposes of the Oklahoma Freedmen Collective, we focus on genealogy, history, culture, and then also storytelling. So telling our stories as people of the 5 tribes.
And to add to that, Shelby, I think it's really important that there is, regardless of what other institutions are doing, that we have a body that's just dedicated to our to Freedmen history, Freedmen culture, and our genealogy, because those are the things that when we talk about organizing within the tribes, depending on the tribe, Freedmen had different levels of access to tribal government and to inclusion in that, but that doesn't mean that we didn't have our own self-determination in our own communities where we organize. And so I think before we even think of talking to tribal entities, that we need to organize within ourselves first to be strongest there. And that's what I hope that this group helps us accomplish. So.
And can I add too, and this is just my own personal opinion, in the pursuit of citizenship rights, I feel like a lot of us lose the history and the legacy that we come from. And I often tell the story of one of the first events I went to after becoming a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. And I was sitting next to a woman and we were talking, and she didn't even realize that her ancestor slaveholder was actually on the Dawes card that was used to get her citizenship. And so that story always stayed with me, because I thought, gosh, there's such a huge part of this history that she doesn't know, yet she, was able to utilize her citizenship rights. And so I don't want to make it seem like we're working against, because that's not it. We're working in concert with, just as we are amplifying the efforts of organizations like Freedmen of the Five Civilized Tribes and, whatever they are, right? Our charge and our call is to share the history of these people that lived long enough, that have descendants who are still alive, who can tell their stories and really add nuance to the history of the Indian Territory, and make it so that it's not all of one aspect of a story being told, and then there's like this little acknowledgement about the rest of us. It's to actually amplify our story at the same level, right? Instead of having a microphone where one person is talking this close and everyone else is back here, everyone is uniform in sound.
Kind of
I want to follow up
on that. I was in a meeting the other day about the McCurk decision. And I think, like Mark's point is that we need to have a representative of the freedmen that sits at those tables, because they talk about air, water, and gas and oil, but they never talk about the freedmen. So we need to have somebody or a group of us who represents us in particular, that may represent all five of the freedmen tribes. But like Shelby said, that's different from what the collective is doing now. So we need to just pull out some people who may have those gifts, those talents, that are willing to stand and legally represent us with the tribes.
And federal Indian policy, I feel, is extremely complicated. And a lot of people point to the treaty rights that we have in the treaties of 1866, but I just feel if you really don't understand or can't comprehend the lived experience of our ancestors living in Indian Territory through statehood and how that treaty affected them, you can read the Treaty of 1866 in the year of 2020 and not have any of the conclusions that are going to get you to where you want to be. And so that's why I think that the work that we're doing is super important to any organization, any organizing that Freedmen will do in the future.
Yeah,
I want to support that concept. Last year, I had a chance to give a presentation in Denver, Colorado. And after I had presented, a woman came up to me, very, very excited and very delightful woman. And she was saying, oh, I just wanted to share with you, I'm a member of the Cherokee Nation. I just got my citizenship card. She pulled it out of her wallet and shared it with me. So I said, oh, how wonderful. Congratulations. By the way, who do you descend from? And she said, well, on the Dawes roll, my ancestor, and she gave me the name of the person. I said, oh, did they happen to have a good file? Were you able to get a really good interview and learn a lot more details about them? And she looked at me kind of quizzically, file? What do you mean? I said, I mean the Dawes interview, the application jacket. I sort of reworded it, and I just given a presentation on this. And she said, well, I haven't seen that. I'm not sure I understand what you're referring to. Now, this is a woman who did what was required. She documented her history, herself, her birth certificate, her parents' birth and death certificates, and she got back to her Dawes ancestor, found the name, found it on a roll, found a roll number, and submitted her documents. She had never done the research. I said, I'm going to get back to you when I return home, and I'm going to help you find this interview packet. When I got home and pulled it up, she had a 120-page file on her ancestor. She had never read it, never heard it. The stories that came out of that file alone were fantastic. And the people they knew, one of whom knew Ike Rogers, by the way, Nika, but it was absolutely amazing. She'd never read it. She did what she needed to get a card and was happily walking off into the sunset without knowing her history. And it's knowledge of that history that is far greater than a card that fits in your wallet. That card is not going to give you anything that can be life-changing, but knowledge of who you are can definitely be life-changing. And this is what we're about, trying to make sure that people are aware of this very unique history. There were 20,000 people, 20,000 people who were classified as freedmen. If you tally all of them up in the 5 tribes, and whether they were freedmen minors or newborns or on the standard card, 20,000 people. Now, of course, there are hundreds of thousands of descendants from those 20,000 people. Stories, incredibly rich stories to tell. That's what we're about here in the collective. And it is so important. It's not just about citizenship. When you can't even tell when your folks got back to the territory, how did they get back? What do you mean they camped in the front yard of Sugar George and then moved on to Fort Gibson and then went on to Taft? And this was a movement of a people who were emerging into their new era of freedom because the trajectory of their lives had changed. People who preceded Oklahoma statehood by 7 decades, people who preceded the land rush, people whose presence in the territory preceded the Civil War. We've got stories to tell, and our ancestors are waiting for us to tell those stories. That's what we want to do, and assist you with methods on how to do that.
Look, thank you for that's the wrap it up machine, Angela. I'm just gonna give you your standing ovation. But it's so right. And of course, Shelly is in the chat room. She mentioned, she's like, we have to say what the 5 civilized tribes are, or what that is, right? And a lot of folks don't realize that we're specifically speaking to the descendants of the formerly enslaved. And we also have to add this caveat, the fact that, yes, we are descendants of the formerly enslaved, but we are also, in a lot of instances, descendants from the by blood members of the nation, right? We are, it's both. It's not a yes and. And a lot of the story that has been told over time has been, well, you guys are just the descendants of the enslaved. And if me or the Anderson sisters or Ian had our way, we'd be slang banging our DNA results up in people's faces, like, explain to me this, or Robin, or Angela, or Denise, or Kenneth, or Shelby. We all have that story. And so I just telling you, I just feel them all here, like chanting for us right now. So that's the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole nations, okay? There are other groups that have people of African descent who are associated with them, or who are citizens or are fighting for their citizenship. But with this particular collective, we have a focus on those 5 nations that I just referenced. All right, so that answers one question. The second question we have from Randy Taylor, as opposed to Randy Watson, is what time will the first Saturday meetings be? And let's see, hold on. What time are our meetings, Shelby?
Nika, and excuse me, I got kicked off because I'm in a place with a thunderstorm, so I lost my connection. So now I'm.
Oh no, I thought you got kicked off for a second.
Yeah, it's been storming here in Atlanta too.
Oh, and she's frozen right now.
And now she's frozen. Okay, we will get the time.
Response.
We will get the time up. We'll make sure we'll put it on the site because I'm spacing on what time we're supposed to do that. But just look for it to be the first Saturday of the month. Let's see. Hold on, because Shelby's still very stoic. She's like stuck right now, but that's all right. We know she's not stuck.
I have to go out and come back in.
Just to go back out and come back in. That's okay. Dear Myrtle said in the chat room, we could put a man on the moon, but electricity is still an issue here on Earth. That is so true. That's like Apple Watches, right? You can go swimming in one, but we haven't quite figured out how to master Wi-Fi yet.
That's funny.
Weird. So, all right. Let's see. There's another hand that's raised. Lonnie Wilson, going to give you the ability to talk. And I'll unmute you. Let's see. Lonnie, would you like to ask your question? I feel like I'm like on a one of those radio shows where like people call in.
Again, the mute button is in the bottom left-hand corner. You have to unhit it before you speak, and then you will be allowed to talk.
Thank you, co-host. Okay, Lonnie, you're still, that's all right. We're gonna wait for you to figure it out.
Or he can type his question in the chat.
Yeah, or you can use the chat function to do that. Let me unmute. I'm gonna try to unmute him again and see if it works. Yeah, maybe there's a connection issue. All right, Lonnie, feel free to use the chat room for your question. Shelly, of course, so what Shelly Murphy is in the chat room asking, was the enslavement under Native Americans the same as what we know of the Southern enslavement of African Americans? That, you know, she knows this is the loaded question, but she's asking for the people who don't know. Was slavery the same? Matter of fact, Anderson sisters, would you like to answer this question so we can get you and Denise Friday involved in this conversation?
Yeah, we can answer it. You can go ahead.
Yeah, so the research is kind of mixed on this. With the Chickasaw and Choctaw nations, more recent research has shown that it was very similar to what you would like see in the South in terms of the amount of violence and in terms of how the slaves were working, and like just like how the masters treated their slaves. But then with like the Seminole nation, there's been a lot of research that has shown that like Seminole masters would often just like have their slaves work in a field separate from the main plantation, and the slaves had a lot less supervision than you would see in the. It's kind of mixed. Some Creek owners were very similar to Seminole masters, but then some were not as similar, and were more similar to what you would see in the South. And then with the Cherokee nation, again, it's been really mixed, where like some historians have said that it's not been as violent, but like Professor Celia Naylor's book really showed that there was a lot of violence still on the plantation and a lot of like surveillance and control of slaves. But basically in all of them, either way, they were all owned by like masters. They didn't have their own, like they couldn't really assert their own choices, and yeah, they were still subject to violence in order to control their labor. Mm-hmm. So no matter what nation you're talking about, they were all slaves still. But yeah, definitely the Chickasaw and Choctaw nations, through like historical analysis, have been the most similar to the antebellum South.
And I think it's important to note that with all of the tribes, and with the South, there's variations based on the slaveholder and like the number of slaves on a plantation and what work they're doing. So like, I think that's what makes it the most similar, is that like you're going to see variation based on so many different factors. But like research has shown, it's just as violent. And like the slaveholders weren't these great people just because they were Native American. They were still exploiting their slaves and treating them as non-human in many ways. But yeah, again, there's just a lot of variation. So I think that's really what makes it most similar to the South.
Yeah, and a lot of Native American owners weren't necessarily growing cotton and things like that. Like they were growing, type of work that slaves were doing may have been different as well, depending on what their owner was growing. Yeah, especially they weren't necessarily growing cotton based off of.
Anyway, yeah.
Okay, you're still there. We heard everything you said, and it was great. And to add to that question, there were still slave codes in the 5 civilized tribes. In fact, if you're not familiar with that, and you may be somebody who may be a member that's not a freedman, I highly suggest that you look that up, because it was published in the newspaper several times. And the slave codes were very similar, at least in the Cherokee Nation, were very similar to the code that you would find outside of it.
And acts of resistance.
Exactly, and acts of resistance. I was just getting ready to say that. There was a whole rebellion in the Cherokee Nation. And the
Seminole Nation and the Choctaw Nation.
Yes.
So, yes, people resisted their status as people in bondage. Absolutely.
To compare slavery in Indian Territory to slavery in the United States, I think is missing the point about the institution of slavery itself. Because slave conditions weren't static in Indian Territory, just like they weren't static in the South. They were changing conditions depending on the plantation owner, depending on a lot of factors. But the institution of chattel slavery itself, and I think that it's really important that we we separate chattel slavery from other forms of slavery because Native people in the Southeast did practice forms of slavery before chattel slavery, but it was not a system based on race that was inherited. And that is a strictly European concept that was adapted to those tribes. And so it being a chattel slave system, the institution in itself will function pretty much the same. And there, even in the South, you know, there are exceptions to how things were run, but it was still chattel slavery and the institution was the same. So
I just have to chime in that the elders in the chat room are like, we love all these young people and the fact that they're smart. They don't, don't stop. Don't come in here trying to steal our young people. These are our young people. These are our young people. So there's another question.
Oh, and Nika,
yes,
may I interrupt?
Go ahead, Shelby, you can bounce in and out as much as you
okay. I apologize because the thunderstorm is interrupting my connection, and so I need to announce the winners of the door prize. That's probably my most important job here today. So so the first two winners get either volume 1 or volume 2, and then the third person gets both. Okay, and we'll contact you and get you in the mail. But so our first two winners, True Lewis, and then Janice, and I think it's Janice Wiggins. And then, so they will get either 1 or 2, so volume 1 or volume 2. And then Michelle Lingen, I might be mispronouncing, excuse me, you get both. And maybe we could take a moment, Miss Angela, maybe in a nutshell, can you talk about the books? So volume 1 and volume 2. Volume 2 is hot off the presses. So congratulations to the door prize winners.
Yes. Volume 1, which was published last year. First of all, just a brief note. This project stemmed out of a blogging meme that had been shared in the genealogy community. And a popular blogger, Amy Johnson Kroll, I'll mention her name, she oftentimes refers to this blogging meme of documenting 52 ancestors in 52 weeks. Well, my folks were just good folks. I don't have 52 of them that I really want to write a whole lot about. Most of my folks were just ordinary folks living their lives. But then I realized, wait a minute, I research freedmen of Indian Territory every day. I've been doing it steadily since 1991. Why don't I try, and this was 2017, to document one family per week for an entire year. And at the end of 2017, I had documented 52 freedmen families in 52 weeks. I spent most of 2018 putting it together in manuscript form and decided, once I realized I had over 500 or so pages, that I was going to split it into 2 volumes. So in 2019, volume 1 was published, which was Freedmen of the Frontier, volume 1, Selected Cherokee, Choctaw, and Chickasaw Freedmen Families. I then worked over the last several months to make sure that volume 2 would come out, and it just came out on June the 30th of this year, volume 2 of Freedmen of the Frontier, Selected Creek and Seminole Freedmen Families. And so this has been a labor of love. I research all the time. And one of the things that really contributed to this, and it's something that I encourage people to do, I encourage you to do in your storytelling. You know, it's not just about your family. Some of these folks may be related to one family directly that was in volume 1, but the rest of the folks, not really. You know, I've learned a lot, however, about my family by researching other families. The story, the greater story, is not just your own family. Start to explore the people who also lived in that community. If your folks are from Scullyville, research the different families in Scullyville. You're going to recognize surnames that perhaps you grew up with or played with as a child. You're going to see a lot of interesting things you never knew about and learn more about your family. I have found such value in doing that. And as you enter this storytelling experience through the Freedmen Collective, I urge you to find some stories even outside of your family to tell. I found the story of a man when I was researching a Cherokee freedman, and this man in 1890 started to tell his story, how he was taken to Texas in the middle of the Civil War, left in Texas, but before the war ended was suddenly sold to someone in northern Mexico. worked there for 3 years, still enslaved. Then some people came to the person who was holding him captive and said, you've got to release this man. Slavery has ended. Took him across the border and left him. He had to literally work his way back to the Cherokee Nation. What a story. Absolutely incredible. I'm not related to this guy, but I want his story told. And these are the stories of survival that our ancestors really have to tell. And which is why I committed myself to putting together these 2 books, and I'm happy to share them with you. And Shelby, of course, you'll get the names of the people, and I will contact them and get their mailing information. So
yes,
congratulations. Congratulations to the winners. And for those who don't have copies and want a copy, I'll make sure that you get the link on Amazon. Both copies are on sale now.
Yeah, the links have been put in the chat room already.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much.
All right, so we've got some other questions. There are a few, and we want to make sure we know, we see there's a couple hands up as well. I'm going to answer, there's one question in the chat room that was around maybe 6 or 7 minutes ago. Jonalyn Cooten, I might be saying her last name wrong, forgive me for that. She says, I'm 61, knew my ancestors who were on the Dawes, and by 81, well, actually, no, that's not my question, but I like that comment. Scroll back. I've got to go back further up. Here it is, Patricia Lee. Question. I've been researching ancestry for many years, but I feel I'm in my infancy with respect to my freedmen research. On at least 2 occasions, I've come across records on Native American rolls, one for Chickasaw and one for Choctaw. However, what stopped me was that although the names were identical, the dates did not square 100% with the dates that I had for my ancestors, younger or older to my knowledge. Any experience with dealing with this issue? Yes. And I would say maybe looking at some of the content on the website may provide you with a little bit more easier way to wrap your arms around it. Because I think once you really dive deep into this type of research, and you all nod and let me know if this is me or if it's all of you, you start to see certain hallmarks that let you know that you have the right people. Like, oh, yeah, they were in Newada or Veneta, or, oh, wow, okay, I'm looking at the Dawes card right before, right after, and I see a cousin, or I see another family member of that person. Or when I go and pull the actual application that goes along with the Dawes card, and I hear them talking about their family members, it lists out the family members' names and ages, and in that way you can confirm or deny whether or not that's your people. And so, the principles of traditional genealogy always apply to freedmen research. It's just you have to learn how to look through the records in a particular way, and where to find them in some ways, right? That is the issue, and the fact that we ain't got a census until 1900, so that means you got to work around other records. Another question that I saw in the Q&A area: what are the first steps an individual needs to take to start the process of finding their freedmen ancestors in South Carolina or North Carolina? That would be more of a Cherokee Nation thing, I'm thinking, right? If we're talking about Carolinas, at least North Carolina. Anyone else want to weigh in on that? Ian, you're silent.
Oh,
Angela.
yeah, I would say probably I would look for, well, first of all, do not abandon standard genealogy methodology. You cannot abandon that. You don't want to start out by trying to look up some Indian ancestor. You research to find the people, not to find a race, not to find an identity. You want to find the people. When you find the people through standard methodology, you will find your identity by doing it the right way. But there are some records. I would encourage you to look at the records of the Guion Miller Roll, Eastern Cherokee applications, and they are available online. They are on Ancestry, and most of the records, well, not every single one, but most of the records that we utilize are found on either Ancestry or fold3.com. That's FOLD, number 3.com. I happen to like Fold3 when I want to do sort of a browse through the records where you can flip through very quickly. And what I mean by that, their interface just makes an item load fast. Now, if you want to see records such as Dawes cards, which are in color, yeah, Ancestry is great for that. But if you want to just do a flip through, and especially with the Cherokee, Eastern Cherokee application, I encourage you to use Fold 3. Your library may have, if you don't have a subscription, your library, use your library card and see if they have one. And you can be able to go online and utilize that site. I would encourage you to do that. But yes, I would encourage you for the Carolinas, including North Carolina as well, because people from multiple states are found on those Eastern Cherokee applications.
Agree. And I like how the Anderson sisters popped in there. Family search for initial research. It's free. Exactly. So if you don't have an Ancestry subscription, feel free to use Family Search. And then there are additional records, right? And here's the thing, as these first Saturdays elapse and as we have more meetings, we're going to really get into the meat of how to research these people, because what we've all had to, it was trial by error for a lot of us until we got into contact with other people who have been researching either as long as we had or longer. And for the young people, it's us finding the records that some of our elders like Terry and Angela were looking at on microfilm. It's us finding them online and saying, hey, everybody, you better come get some before they take it off. You know, we all act like it's gonna evaporate. We're scared, like, don't take it down, right? That's how we all act, but that's okay. And of course, public library, a lot of them have access to Ancestry subscriptions. So if you cannot afford to have a subscription, feel free to definitely utilize your public library to utilize that as well as Family Search. Let's see, Randy Taylor, I'm going to give you the ability to talk and go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Randy's got a profile picture. We're waiting for Randy to unmute yourself.
Unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, Randy.
I just want to say I appreciate this panel and the platform to be able to explore all of our history. It's so important. I'm from Southern California, and my family was the Cherokee Nation. And I'm trying to discover the man. His name was Jesse Bushyhead. He owned my family. And I looked on the Dawes Roll, and there's a lady by the name of Dorcas Buffington. And that was my great-great-great-grandmother. And on her Dawes Roll, it said she was owned by Jesse Bushyhead. I found that on Ancestry. So I just wanted to see, are there other ways? And I know Miss Angela mentioned, and other folks mentioned that there are other ways to delve more into finding more information about that. But could you just emphasize how to go about that online and just different websites and things?
Okay.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm chomping at the bit because.
Go ahead, Nika.
I was about to say, I want to be like, hey! So you mentioned two hallmarks of Cherokee Nation freedmen. You said Southern California, that was the first, you will learn this as you we all orbit each other. That's all we do. We leave the Indian Territory and we go to different places. We just orbit each other. Like Southern California, Northern California, Kansas City, those are like the three top places. So when you said Southern California,
my grandfather grew up in Kansas City too. So
and whose grandparent didn't? That's all I'm saying here.
Yeah.
So what I will tell you is pre-1900, what you want to do for the Cherokee Nation is there's a collection called like Oklahoma and Indian Territory censuses, at least on Ancestry. If you go to search and then you go down to the bottom of the page to the map that says Oklahoma, click that. That collection is at the very top because it has the most records. That will show you all of the tribal rolls prior to statehood. You want to track your people on those intermittent rolls because it's not like the census where it's every 10 years. It's like 1896, 1893, right? And you'll find people that didn't live long enough for the Dawes on those rolls. And then I would also check for Eastern Cherokee, even if your folks weren't in the Carolinas or weren't part of the quote unquote Eastern Cherokee, people still filled out applications. So, we all love a good rejection in the Dawes Commission. All of us do, right? Even though the people living there are like, they got rejected. We're like, yes, that means it's at least 75 pages in the file, right?
Yeah.
So we look at that as like a win-win. You're going to use those Eastern Cherokee and you're going to use those Dawes cards, those applications. Those are going to give you all the breadcrumbs you need to reshape your family tree prior to 1900. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. I had to break all these people out into a separate tree because it was too many people. So we're gonna support you in that, but I would, if I were you, I would start with those Oklahoma Indian Territory census records. And here's the thing, it applies to the Cherokee, but there's also Choctaw records in there. Like the Dunn roll is in there. These are all pre-Dawes Commission rolls that were put together by the nations. Anybody else have any feedback? Because I can't wait to just jack up Randy's life for the rest of the weekend.
Well, let me tell you something. I'd like to also jack up his life a little bit. I don't know if you've heard the name Buck Bushyhead, but you need to become familiar with him. He was one of a group of people in 1866 who wrote to the Freedmen's Bureau in Fort Smith, Arkansas, my hometown. There was a field office of the Freedmen's Bureau who were saying, look, we're freedmen from these tribes. We're trying to get home to our families. But the tribes are not letting us, threatening to shoot us because we're still wearing our Union Army uniforms, and we're trying to get there. And in fact, I wrote an article about that letter that I found in the Freedmen's Bureau, where this group of individuals were trying to get back, and Buck Bushyhead was one of them. And these were people, most of whom were soldiers, coming back after the war. Bushyhead is a major Cherokee name. Jesse Bushyhead, among others. There are also Eastern Cherokees with that surname. When you said that, my eyes kind of went, oh, okay. You have a very rich history, extremely rich history. And beyond the Dawes, there's a lot for you beyond Dawes. You're going to find Bushyheads that are going to be in some of those 1890 records that Nika was referring to. You're going to find Bushyheads that are also going to be in the 1880 authenticated Cherokee census. You're not ready yet for those unless you've done your other standard genealogical strategies and have employed those. But there are tons and tons and tons of pieces of information that are there for you.
Yeah.
And
I would
once
also
you find
say
them,
search your DNA results, because I got some Bushyheads. Matter of fact, I'm about to look for yours right now.
oh my gosh. And also Dennis Bushyhead, I don't know if that is your ancestor or not, but he was also, because you have some relatives who were by blood, he was the son of Jesse Bushyhead, but there were some who were freedmen as well. And all I can say is, oh my God, you have a wonderful journey that awaits you. I would research not only every Bushyhead, I would research everyone in that particular community where a lot of them lived. Pull out the maps, the oldest maps that you can locate. There are a lot of old maps of the territory that are online. Also find out where your ancestors got land allotments. You have things to keep you busy. You're a young man, I can tell by your photo. You have things to keep you busy until you become an old man. And it will be a wonderful, wonderful journey. They lived around Claremore and other communities, and because I'm looking at a Dawes card, I know that. But oh my gosh, you've got incredible resources to find your family. So I'm excited. I'm excited to hear that that's one of your family lines.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see. And the map that she was talking about, or at least one that I use all the time, is the 1892 one from the Library of Congress, that has all the Indian Territory, or Indian, the nations that are in what became Oklahoma. I love that map because then it really gives you an idea of where stuff is. And look, and people in the chat room talking about, I found Bushyheads in my DNA map. I told y'all. All right, Shelby, anything else? Let's see, there's another question in here about, will your group also be working with descendants of freedmen whose application for the Dawes roll rejected? Yes, absolutely. This project is for the rejected people. I guess maybe I should tell folks, I only have one line of my family. Even though my grandmother's, both of her parents were freedmen, I only have one line that I could apply for citizenship on. One. I got more from the rejected people. That told the story of my ancestors. Did my great-grandfather's one little page. What's your name? What's your mama name? What's your daddy name? Okay, we found her on the 1880 census. Okay, you all right. It was 5 pages. That was it. That's the app that got me in. But the litany of others that got rejected, that's what told the story of the family. So yes, in fact, come on, rejected people. Bring it on.
I love rejected files.
I do too.
Oh, they're thick, number one. They're much thicker. And the stories that pour out from them. And we haven't even talked about the records that come out of the U.S. Colored Troop pension files,
We-
and the
Angela, we
records
ain't
of
going
the
there.
Indian Home
We ain't
Guard
going
and
there,
their
Angela.
pension files.
We ain't going there. We are not
We can
going
have a whole month devoted to
We ain't
Civil
got enough
War.
time. We ain't got
Absolutely
enough time.
incredible.
Shelby, go right on ahead because I know we're over time.
Well, I thank everyone for coming. This is just the beginning of the collective journey, so I'm so glad that you're here with us at the beginning. And so again, we'll be having these monthly chats. So continue to bring your questions to those chats, and then also through our presence online. And and just reiterating the calls to action. So Freedmen descendants, please fill out the survey so we can tailor our content towards the needs of the community. Our friends and supporters, please continue to think about us and consider working with us for collaborative efforts. And you can reach out to us individually or through that form, which is on our website. And I'm trying to think about the other action that I had. Yes, of course, look at that Metro map because that's the plan. And I also have a date for each of those stops. And so you can put us on your calendar for the future.
Did we ever land on a time? Because someone did ask.
Oh, okay. And because I got cut off in the storm. So I was thinking noon. So I guess I would say it's undecided. So I was thinking noon Central Time. But if there's any feedback from the community, please send us a message on social media or email. And we'll talk about what platform we'll have it on. So I don't know if we'll still use Zoom or some other, but we'll talk about that. And you'll hear about, how to log on and what URL to use to reach us or to reach the meeting. So.
Good. Some of the people who have won door prizes have asked for you to sign their books, Angela. So I just wanted to put that in the atmosphere. People with the initials T and L have asked.
I shall do that. Very good.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We are excited. I just want to thank individually Angela, Kenneth, Tirza and Keziah, Denise Friday. Hi, Denise. Robin, Shelby, and Ian. Any final words? Matter of fact, Robin, you didn't say anything. Denise, you didn't say anything. Is there anything you guys would like to say with us closing?
I think more than anything, because my great-grandfather died early on. But my family still lives on Dawes Land in McAlester, Oklahoma. There are a whole bunch of them there. My family didn't know, so doing the DNA helps me out tremendously. Like, that's where I'm getting a lot of my leads from, because my family just doesn't know it, and they're still there in Oklahoma today. So I say do the DNA. It helps a lot.
Okay. Denise?
I'm just excited about this group. I'm excited about the turnout on today. And I'm just looking forward to just doing more research.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Be sure to join us on the 1st of August. And here's to our journey. Have a great day. Exactly.
Okay.
Bye-bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.